What is up, our Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to another episode of the Monday Meta Watch video. Zach Stone and I are going to go over Lorcana meta trends, tournament results, and what you need to be expecting in this Winter Spell format, especially now that we finished our first DLC of the format. Huge shout out to Southern California legend Dylan LeDuc Molestar on Fight Club Online, number one on Fight Club usually too, taking it down with the Costco Hot Dogs deck over here. Chroma Dogs still very real in this meta with a couple new cards. We got 4 of the Grandmother Willow and 4 of this new Nani. If you guys were watching the Melbourne stream, you got to see this deck in action against Blurple, and as you guys usually know by now, this deck has a pretty good matchup against Blurple, man, and being able to witness the power of Grandmother Willow to let you play a Tramp on turn 3 is kind of crazy, followed by the cards like Nani, which let you search for cards like Go-Go or your ladies. Just kind of put this deck over the top is what it felt like. But we have the infamous combo of 3 Chromacon, 2 Under the Sea, and 3 Della's Moon Lullaby to kind of control the board as well. You know, the dog deck, very, very strong at being able to do multiple things with your strategy, right?
Yes, and Lorcana Goons, if you have not picked up your Costco hot dog deck, which a Costco hot dog would only cost you like $1.50, I think this deck is only going to cost you about $120 right now. And if you guys do like the finances, we do have our Friday market watch, and I can't wait to talk about some of these card prices in that episode. But this deck and the way this deck plays almost feels like a pseudo control deck at times, but you're able to step on the gas at any moment, and the plan is always the same: build your board until you can play your Tramp. That way, when you establish your Chromacon, it's almost impossible for your opponent to deal with your board. You're getting tons of free value too by discarding Lilo Escape Artists and being able to bring that back with the cost reduction that Grandmother Willow gives you. This means that you're playing it for cheaper if you do bring it back at the start of your turn. And honestly, the deck has so many win conditions, it's insane. I do want to highlight a few cards here. We have Mowgli Mancub and Ursula Deceiver. These cards are very pinnacle to the deck's success. I really feel like without these characters that this deck doesn't have as many legs to walk on as the dogs normally should. And just disrupting your opponent, removing their removal, and taking out key cards like Under the Seas or potential Raging Storms could just allow your board to stay healthy and strong. And you cannot forget about Go-Go Tamago, the alternative win condition that does punish your opponent if they are able to start challenging your characters.
Yeah, and I do want to go on record saying that Molestar has been playing dogs for a while now alongside not only Zach, but a couple people at our locals. This guy plays at our local game store, so we're able to actually pick his brain and talk to these people on a regular basis. And I know, Zach, you were talking with the homies Justin and Dylan, kind of talking about dogs last format, and I remember what we were talking about it. We felt like it was probably the best deck in the room, right? But I think a lot of people have a misconception of how this deck is supposed to be played, because it looks like an aggro deck. You have a lot of 2 Lord Questers, your ladies can quest for 3, you got Daisy Duck, but it's not really an aggro deck. Like, if you watch the streams, if you watch the way Dylan was playing, the last 3 best of 5 match, you'll notice he was only questing on his first turn and then questing after he set up his Tramp and Chromacon play, or after he set up a Lullaby Under the Sea play. And I think that's kind of the hard thing about playing this deck is you have to be really patient. It's like a very patient aggro deck, but it's the deck that'll let you quest from 0 to 12 in 1 turn. And if you're already at 12 lore, you only need a couple Go-Go's, maybe a Nani or 2 to get you the cards you need to finish the game. Dogs, probably still one of the best decks of the meta right now. I think a lot of it also has to do with the limited amount of item removal we have in this game, right? Most of the time you have to kind of mess up your deck list to add item removal like Benja or Wasabi just to deal with a card like Chromacon or maybe even Snowfort, because Snowfort is another card I've been seeing people play in the dog deck. But I do want to get your opinion, Zach, because you're a little bit more well versed in the dog deck than me. What do you think is better, Chromacon or Snowfort at this point, and why?
I haven't tested Snowfort personally, and when I was playing dogs, I actually opted against Emerald Chromicon for different reasons. But the deck, I think, takes on a different role when you play a card like Snowfort. You do have to keep in mind that your characters are also going to gain additional strength. That means the Lady Decisive dog can also quest a little bit more easily and quest for 3. Plus, you're being able to put a lot of damage into the opposing characters when they are challenging. So Gogo Tamago really shines there with a card like Snowfort. But I will say that this deck may or may not need to continue with items anymore. I think people are going to start having some item removal in their lists, and so it could be counterintuitive to still continue to play cards like Chromicon or add cards like Snowfort, but I do believe that there are so many ways to build and play around this dog deck. Let's not forget that Dylan executed this deck flawlessly on stream, and I'm sure he did throughout his remainder of the tournament. Congratulations again for taking this down, and a big special shout out to the Collectors Lounge for just being a very, very supportive local game store in our SoCal community.
Yeah, man. A huge shout out to Caesar down there, Mandy, all you guys. We can't wait to throw that party. It's gonna be it's gonna be a really cool week for SoCal, man. I just want to mention something that caught my attention in that last match. If you guys are watching, there was a couple times where Dylan was able to use his Chromicon to bounce back his Nani, and that the one Nani he played, it got a lot of value, man. It searched for 1, 2, 3 characters back to back to back to the point where Jonathan Lamb, his finals opponent, had to use the Hades and a Let It Go on the Nani before swinging again because he realized this guy's just going to keep bouncing back his character. What Nani does, 3 cost character, 3 strength, 3 willpower, quest for 1. When you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Then you can add a character with 2 cost or less and put it to your hand. That's pretty much your whole deck, bro. But I have seen some tweets from some players. I think it was Diagos. He said that he whiffed on his Nani in top 16. So you can miss on it, right? But you have so many clean targets for this card. Like, I feel like this deck just needed an extra little way to reach more cards from your deck, right? Like, we had the Shift Lady, and that was like the small amount of recovery you had in this deck alongside Lilo the Escape Artist, but Nani just puts it over the top, bro. Like, don't know how to explain it. Like, I just love that they made cards like this in Lorcana, because for a while we don't really have many +1s in this game, and this is an inkable card. So I think this is perfect for the dog deck. Just want to give a huge shout out again to Molestar aka Dylan. And I also want to let you guys know at home that, like, practice makes perfect, we've gone to multiple DLCs with like our SoCal community, and Molestar's been there too, and multiple times has he missed his top cut opportunity, and sometimes it's luck, you know what I mean. So sometimes it's maybe the way the day went, but this guy practices so much. He's been #1 on like Hearthstone, #1 on the online sim for this game, and the moment he made it to his top cut, bam, took down the whole tournament. You know what I mean? Sometimes it just takes a couple times, takes a couple tries before it's your day. And I just want to remind you guys at home, practice makes perfect. And if you guys have it in you, you can do it too. It's so cool to see, man. I know a lot of us have been so close to that top cut, and I know when you guys get there, you're gonna see the success too. But here is the second place list by none other than Lamb Chops, aka Jonathan Lamb, huge player in the Lorcana community. This guy, I think he won his 3rd or 4th Golden Mickey this weekend with this list here. And Jonathan Lamb is known for playing Sapphire Steel. Very strong player from the World Class Cards team, and very congrats, by the way, for making it all the way to 2nd place. Looking like we're playing 4 Let It Go in Blurple, and that looks like the only change in this meta, which seems like an obvious change, right? Like, I am still shocked they reprinted Let It Go. I felt like Into the Unknown was like going to be the replacement for that card, and I would even go as far as to say that I didn't think people would still play Into the Unknown because Let It Go is just broken, right? But a couple things that are different. Obviously, it's a 5 cost, not a 3 cost song, and that's really important, I think, against the dog matchups, right? Because it's a whole extra turn that you're not going to be able to sing on their characters. So sometimes you really do want the Elsa Into the Unknown combo ready to go. So I know some people have been toying around with ratios like 2 Into the Unknown, 4 Let It Go. I think 4/4 is just the way to go, right? You have 8 removal cards in a deck that already feels like one of the best decks to control the game, right?
The amount of consistency and explosiveness this deck has is just putting it over the top once again. And Amethyst is the most powerful color we have in the game of Lorcana as of right now. So on top of Sapphire just giving the additional ink earlier is allowing us to play these cards a lot sooner. And let's just think about the curve, right? 1 into 2 into a 4 cost, because your 2 drop is going to give you an additional ink. So on turn 4, you're playing a 5 drop. And then when you do get to play the Demona, that 5 cost character is going to sing the Let It Go you're able to draw. So against these dog decks, you can answer their wide boards. And you may not have item removal in a deck list like this, and we did see Jonathan Lem have to deal with some stuff alternatively before challenging, just like Into the Unknown and Let It Go can do. On top of the 4 Hades, I do think that the amount of removal in this deck without challenging can give it some legs into that dog matchup that we saw, but it unfortunately wasn't able to get him there this time. But I'm not so sure that Blurple always has the disadvantage against dogs. Again, there are a lot of cards you can find that help deal with the board. Don't forget, we have Cheshire Cat that almost makes it quite difficult for the dog deck to safely use their Chromicon, especially when you're able to stack the damage quite well. And you're always consistently keeping 2 or 3 damage on characters. That way, when you're moving the damage around, you're forcing your opponent to bounce something that could remove another character like a Hades or an Elsa. And you definitely don't want them to bounce that cat of yours, right? Well, you're wrong, because that's more cards that you could potentially get from boosting it. And don't forget, the cards follow that character.
Congrats again, Jonathan Lamb, aka Lamb Chops, for acquiring another Golden Mickey at this DLC Melbourne. It was almost about 420 players, so that's pretty cool. I know Melbourne kind of has like a smaller DLC community from what we've seen, but still very cool to see some of these big names make it all the way to the top. And huge shout out to World Class Cards and the whole team. You know, we know a couple of you guys too, and it's always nice to see you guys, representing the Lorcana community out there. And in top 8 of this tournament, we have a Ruby Amethyst deck list by Hey Bay. Huge shout out as a fellow Ruby Amethyst enjoyer. Love to see it making it all the way to top 8 of this tournament, only to lose to the winner, Dylan, against dogs, which is kind of crazy to me, because when I think of Ruby Am, I think this is the dog farmer, right? Like, I think this is the deck that is really good against the Lady and the Champ dog deck. But, to still lose to the champion, it's pretty crazy. But, so this strategy, what you want to do is on turn 1, you obviously want to play either a Tinkerbell or a Palace Guard, maybe even a Diablo, depending on your matchup, right? Turn 2, we now have this 2-cost Unequal Diablo from the Whispers in the Well set. This is a really strong card because against these Sapphire decks, you're going to be able to start questing for 2, 3 lore if you have a 1 character immediately, right? So while your opponent's spending time trying to ramp into a Cinderella and set up a Moana, you're already like at 6, 8 lore by like turn 3. You can start dropping your Peter Pans or your Sisus, that quest for 2, your Genie's quest for 2, your Hercules can quest for 2. You have a lot of 2 lore questers to dump your hand out, play a Demona, and refill your hand, which is really strong. But I do want to highlight this new Beast's Castle card. This is a 1-cost location, very strong. It has a 1 move cost and 6 willpower, and it says whenever a character here challenges another character, you gain 1 lore, which is pretty cool, because now you can take advantage of cards like your Diablo, which will draw you a card, or maybe even you're pumping up your characters with Lumiere, so you can get some really good value trades, and now when you move them into the castle, you just gain an extra lore as well. Unfortunately, the location does not give you any passive lore, right? So it's going to sit on the board, but it does synergize very well with this 2-cost beast, right, Zach?
Absolutely. That beast's ability is unable to take damage while it is at a location. So it just works really well with that beast castle. Mind you, it's only while challenging, not all times. However, I do want to kind of make a little mention here that Diablo, that quest for 2 might be a good thing to do, but the deck is named Diablo Challenges. So I wonder which one he's talking about, the 1 drop or the 2 drop. But let's also mention the removal that this deck has. You can't forget the Amethyst package and how strong the draw power is, but Headless Horseman is just one of the best Ruby removal cards to come out as of recent, and this card does a lot for the deck. Being able to also buff your characters and have additional strength is going to allow you to deal with some higher willpower characters like that 7-cost 2/6 Tramp, so it almost seems like that matchup should be in your favor. However, unfortunately, this person, Hey Bay Hey, was defeated by none other than the champion himself, Dylan. So, Dogs beating its unfavorable matchup and taking the rest of the tournament has to say something. But once again, Rubiam enjoyers rejoice. Your deck is back. And I've honestly thought it was back for a while. I just don't think enough people are convinced it's the best choice to play at a major event. But let's see how many people will prove us wrong. We do have some other events that are coming on very soon, and Winter Spell format is just getting started. So congratulations again for making top 8 of this DLC.
Yeah, I want to say it's been kind of hard to justify playing a deck like Rubiam, right? With the Amethyst package being so powerful, you have a lot of really strong combinations like Amethyst Steel or Blurple or even something like Amethyst Emerald. I feel like most people were thinking, now why would I combine Amethyst with Ruby? Like really, what is the payoff here? And I think the payoff is going to be your 2 lore questers, which is very important. There's not a lot of 2 lore questers in the game right now that get a lot of value, and your Ruby characters do that. So that's kind of cool. And secondly, though, this Headless Horseman makes your Amethyst matchups very, very much in your favor. Your opponents try to set up a Genie into Elsa and you slap down Horseman. You're just popping cards on play. The amount of tempo that you gain from that is really strong. So that might be the trade-off. It can be a little inconsistent because these are uninkable Ruby cards that we're talking about, right? But I think the trade-off here is the 2 lore that you can gain from most of your characters and the extra value that you can gain. Also, no Grab Your Bow. Glad to see no Grab Your Bow in this deck because I don't think that card is it. I think Horseman is just a little bit better. Here we have our 4th place Amethyst Steel list. Very cool. I mean, this list looks a lot like the Amethyst Steel list that we've been seeing from the last couple formats, and I like to say that it's probably the list that I would probably play if I had to play a tournament tomorrow. But no Lexington or Gigi in this deck. That's very interesting. I feel like Lexington and Gigi were staples, in the meta. They're both characters that have alert. They can swing for 4, and I guess looking like a McGoo over here just did not seem like it was necessary. Instead, playing 3 copies of our Genie Satisfied Dragon, kind of similar. It only has 3 strength but has evasive, right? But definitely synergizes well with our Dumbo. But 3 copies of the new Genie Magical Researcher. Now, I was talking down on this card last week. I didn't think it was all that good, but now that I see it in this top cut list, I might consider it myself. 3 strength, 4 willpower that costs 3. Inkable, gotta love it. It's a whisper boost character, so you can pay 1 ink to boost it. And for every card under this character, he gains an extra lore, right? So if you boost it once, he'll quest for 2. You boost it 3 times, bro's gonna start questing for 3. That's kind of hefty.
Definitely hefty. What is important to mention is that all the 3-cost characters that this deck list is playing are pretty much overstated. They're all 3/4s. Some of them even have amazing abilities, and we have 4/4 as a Giant Cobra, one of the most overstated 3-drops that exists right now. So with all that being said, Amethyst Steel still dominating in this Winter Spell meta, and we have the new Sven in this deck list. I think that this is like the perfect answer to some annoying threats. Mind you that this does take out opposing Genies and Elsas while also still surviving on the board, so you can use that 2 damage and move it to another opposing character with the Cheshire Cat on the following turn on curve. I think that is insane to mention. Plus, you have the additional evasive bodies like the 3-cost Genie and the 2-cost Violet Saberwing to give Dumbo the additional value to draw more cards and gain more lore. I think that this was a perfect way to build this list. We also have 2 copies of the Skater Mim here. This is a 2-cost inkable 0/3 character that has Challenger +1 and also gives your other characters Challenger +1. So this is just a complement of dealing with higher willpower characters, and you're just able to control the board and at the same time turn everybody sideways to win the game. So congratulations again for making it to the top 4 of the DLC.
Yeah, I do believe we were able to see this deck place a mirror match in, I think it was top 16 or top 8. It was one of these players, right? And the mirror match looked very, very, very tough. It was just like 7 characters staring at each other because neither player had a Demona or an Elsa yet. And that's kind of what happens, right? Like if you don't have strength in your hand or Demona or Elsa, you're waiting for your opponent to turn sideways. And in this meta right now, they just won't. They'll wait for you to make a mistake. But I do think having that Skater Mim does kind of put you over the top in certain situations. Your opponent might not be reading that and let let's say they have a Hades on board or a Demona, they might think they can just quest with it and survive. But Skatermim plus Sven, that also clears Hades and Demona, dude. That's kind of crazy. So I do like the potential here with the Skatermim in this early meta, right? It's kind of hard to read. And here we have one of the most interesting decks from this tournament. And I've been saying I think Amethyst Steel locations found some legs in this meta. 8th place, we have a Location Mayhem deck by Cord de Conch. Huge shout out to you for taking this anti-meta strategy all the way to 8th place. Unfortunately, only one win away from acquiring a golden Mickey because it was only for top 4, but still, nonetheless, you got to be proud of yourself, bro. This is so cool. Okay, we have a lot of actually, we don't have that many one-cost characters. 8 one-cost characters, but we have the 4 Fairy Ship, 4 Zootopia as our one-cost locations, and 4 Fire the Cannons. Very, very cool. You probably want to start off playing one of those in the beginning of the game, preferably a character, right? Maybe on turn 2, you set up a Lilo bundled up, and on turn 3, you can play your John Silver. Now, John Silver is a 3/3/3 character, but he gains resist +1 and an extra lore for every location you have on board. So on turn 4, you could play multiple locations, maybe a combination of Dwarves Mine plus the Castle Wyvern, or maybe just like 3 Fairy Ship and a Fire the Cannons, and bam, you can quest really heavily immediately. And there's no Strength of a Raging Fire in this deck. The only removal we really have is quick Fire the Cannons, or maybe a little play with our Dwarves Mine to deal some extra damage. But you're just putting constant pressure on the board, right? Being able to play multiple one-cost locations is pretty cool in this type of meta, because you're essentially going really wide on the board with willpower that your opponent has to decide where they're going to prioritize their damage, right? And one-cost characters normally don't have 4 willpower, so these locations that have 4 willpower seem kind of overstated, and they even have some extra effects, right? This Castle Wyvern gives your characters resist +1, which is very, very strong, especially if you already have like a Nala or a Cobra, which are just overstated. And then our Zootopia also has the ability to let us draw and discard a card. This is going to be pretty helpful if you're digging for stuff like White Rose or Cobra to just end the game, right?
Yes, and I do want to also mention too that you're getting an additional card in your hand with Amethyst Chromacon every turn, so almost like filtering to find the exact card you need makes that card better. But I actually want to talk about this strategy that I think this deck list has. So we have no card in this deck costing more than 3, which means we don't even have to ink till more than 3 and for a long time. I think you can play on 3 ink for almost the rest of the game if you had to, because let's think about it like this, guys. If you are needing some additional removal, your 7 Dwarves Mine can just do damage anytime a character moves to it. So we can move our characters back and forth and back and forth, and all our other move costs on every other location cost 1. So at the start of our turn, we're going to be able to draw a card, gain the passive lore, and then we can pay the 1 ink to move a character off the Dwarves Mine and pay 2 ink to move it right back onto it and deal some additional damage. So you almost have like consistent removal at all times. And with that being said, if you're able to just start getting cards in the inkwell, whether or not your opponent puts them there because they're on Sapphire, and then you can just start playing every card from your hand, dropping the board over. And let's not forget, Elsa's Ice Palace is there to freeze some exerted characters, and I saw that card being put to work on stream. I think that this is pretty much an underrated card. I think there's like even a Ruby Amethyst location deck that you can build around it, but outside of that, again, this is an interesting strategy, and this was the 19th version of this deck list according to the deck name. So I gotta say, 19. I want to know what the other 18 versions of this was before we got to this final conclusion, because I am very curious to see the deck building process and to what this takes, because honestly, alternative strategies and homebrews feel like they're alive right now with Winterspell. What do you think about that, Kevin?
I agree. I actually agree. I feel like we finally have a wide enough card pool to kind of play around with this meta. Now, I do want to mention, if we look at the overall meta of this top 32 cut, it looks a lot like the last DLCs we've seen. It's looking like a lot of Dogs, Blurple, and Purple Steel for the most part. There's very, very few outliers, I'll be real with you. But I kind of want to attribute that not necessarily to this meta, but kind of to the idea that this DLC was early on in in the meta. And me as a competitive player, if I had to play a DLC tomorrow, I'm going to pick a safe deck. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to really try and cook too hard. I'm not going to get too creative. I don't want to be too spicy because I think, why try and fix something that's not broken, right? The dog deck is really consistent. The Blurple deck is really consistent. Not much you really have to change there. But I don't want to let that discourage you guys at home from making your home brews and trying to do well, because we have another awesome deck here in top 16, Amber Steel aggro, right? I feel like Amber Steel fell off last format. It felt kind of impossible to play. There's so much hate against it, but now we just have this Nani for some extra recursion, some extra recovery, which is very strong. Our Lilo bundled up. This character can quest for 2, and the first time it's going to take damage, it won't. So this is probably going to eat up usually 2 challenges, and this is like effect damage as well. So if your opponent's not playing stuff like Let It Go, Into the Unknown, maybe even like You're Welcome or Mother Knows Best, more than likely this is going to take up 2 character challenges. And in a deck where you're setting up a Tiana, that is not really what you want to deal with,
Not at all. And I have to say that with the addition of Grandmother Willow for Amber decks, decks like this can just go very wide fast and just have a lot of characters on the board to use a powerful Strength of a Raging Fire turn. I can just imagine, like, on turn 1 you play an Aurora, and then on the next turn after you quest, that Tiana can come down for 2, and then on the following turn, without even having to ink, we can play a 2-cost Grandmother Willow and then drop another 1-drop for free, draw a card, discard a card if it's Mulan, or even play another 1-drop and quest with the Aurora for another princess to be played for free. That's 5 characters in play. I could banish anything with a Strength of a Raging Fire at this point. And on top of that, we have 4 Fire the Cannons to deal with any other aggressive decks that want to come out the gate swinging. We'll let them know what the real aggro deck is like with a deck list like this. And Rhino, the Power Hamster, I think is a powerful card this format. The resist 2 ability is so strong, and there's not too many characters that can deal with it in one shot outside of the new Sven. But think about it like this, guys. We can find out what's in their hand and play around that because we have Mowgli Man Cub. So this deck is very powerful, very strong, and very consistent. Are we going to see Amber Steel aggro back in our meta again?
Some more interesting outliers from this DLC Melbourne. We have Amethyst Emerald, looking like a boost strategy though. It's called Let's Go Shopping for Bargains. Huge shout out to Stranger Jonah. Top 32, very cool. Now, for the most part, Amethyst Emerald isn't a deck that we see too often, but I think this new Snowfort strategy is going to make it a very consistent deck, right? So Snowfort is an item. It says your characters gain +1 strength. That's indefinitely. So now your Go-Go's swing for 3, your Genies can challenge for 3, your Dumbos can challenge for 4. Then on the opponent's turn, all your characters gain resist +1. Pretty cool. I think that this is something that you can play around pretty easily, right? Like if your opponent plays it on turn 3, you just gotta hold some item removal. But if you're questing willy-nilly, then this has the ability to kind of punish you. You can play this when your opponent's not thinking about it. All of a sudden, all your characters get an extra boost of strength. And if your opponent's questing with their evasive characters, they might not think you have an out to some of the high willpower. But I want to talk about this legendary Donald Duck, the Fred Honeywell. Whenever you boost a character, you get to put another card under that character for free. And if you're boosting cards like your Cheshire Cat, it's going to trigger the cat twice, which is kind of crazy. The second ability says when one of your characters is banished, you get to draw cards equal to the number of cards they had under them, right? So if you've been spending time boosting this genie that can quest for 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe just your cat, or maybe even you're shifting your Webby, which is pretty cool, your Donald Duck is going to get you some extra draw power there.
I'm glad you mentioned the Shift Webby part. That has came up in a lot of Fight Club testing in my hands. But yes, the boost mechanic is very powerful with the new Fred Honeywell. I actually wanted to kind of talk about how explosive the Genie Magical Researcher can be. I think you could just take over games with this character. And Lewis, this alligator, and Snowfort just are chef's kiss in the hands. You're just making something reckless, making your Lewis a 5 strength or even a 6 strength character, and it has 1 or 2 resists, so that you're gonna have to swing into it. And Lewis just surviving the challenge is insane. And then you have damage on Lewis, so you can use your Cheshire Cat to move that damage over to another opposing character, and it feels like the game's over from there. But the 2-drop uninkable Pocahontas is what's going to seal the game, because if we have our Genie boosted with like 3 or 4 cards, we're gonna gain like 8 or 9 lore in one turn, and that's just game over with Amethyst Amethyst running around right now. You have lots of interesting removal and tons of explosive energy. And don't forget, we have little interesting, techs here. We have Clarabelle, the one drop with no shift Clarabelle, so we can deal with opposing items. And we have Madam Mim Elephant, so we can use her to return other characters we want to replay for their effects, or any boosted characters, and just essentially draw cards for free. So this deck is not going anywhere. I am expecting a lot of green purple Snowfort to be in the meta. So if you haven't gotten used to this deck list, you better start getting used to it now. And congratulations for making the top cut of the DLC, Stranger Jonah.
And that was it for the main event, but if you guys ever go to the DLCs, just know there's plenty of side events. This is from the Day 2 constructed side event. First place, Amber Amethyst deck right here, very cool. We've been seeing this deck find success since last format, and it's looking like there's not a single new card from Winterspell in this deck list. I thought there was going to be some Raging Storms or something, but it's called For the Glory of Sydney by JV. Huge shout out to you for making it all the way to first place in the side event.
Yeah, the side events are awesome. I do expect a lot more side events to be happening at the DLCs. They have been making more changes, and some people also play the main event. They're like, I didn't like this, I had bad vibes, and maybe they got to change other things, and changing the sleeves could help. And if you guys needed some sleeves or were thinking about getting some dependable brands, we do recommend our team sponsor, Pristine Protection here. They have new standard count sleeves. They are in 70 count, so they are perfect for Lorcana players, and they have a multitude of colors for you to choose from. But this is the best part, guys. With our promo code Goons10 at checkout, you can save 10% off your order, and that directly supports the channel. So again, we really appreciate you guys. If you guys do buy sleeves, let us know in the comments below how these sleeves been treating you. I really love the new quality and the new material that they are using with the new 70 counts, and I've been using Pristine Protection since I've gotten the new ones, and they've lasted me for at least a month. This is great.
Yeah, these sleeves were actually the sleeves that took me to my first top cut. So, me being the superstitious card game player that I am, I'm sticking with them. All right, that's going to be all for our DLC coverage. This video is going to be kind of long because there's a lot of tournaments this weekend, guys. So bear with us. If you guys are still watching, like, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate it, right? We especially appreciate our local Lorcana Goons supporters. Huge shout out to Ramen, aka Michael, taking down the top choice tournament. It was about a 55-player tournament, and he got first place with this Emerald Amethyst Staff Bounce deck. Now, if you guys follow us on Instagram, you saw me post about this deck because he plays at our local store, and he's able to resolve this new Tinkerbell very, very effectively. Both abilities, by the way, Give It Evasive and letting it quest for 4. It's a very interesting deck. I actually got to play some games against him yesterday, and he basically just farms all the Sapphire decks. Apparently, he played against 4 Sapphire decks in Swiss, ID'd the next 2 rounds, and his top 8 matches were all Sapphire. The strategy with this deck now is you want to set up a 1-cost character, maybe a Clarabelle or a Royal Guard, followed by setting up your Chromacon or your Staff pretty early on, because you do not mind giving your opponent cards in their hand whatsoever. If anything, you want your opponent to have cards in their hand so that you can effectively shift Clarabelle, or maybe even just make sure they don't have any cards on the board, right? Because once you're constantly able to set up these singable characters, you can use Maleficent Staff's ability to gain 1 lore every time you bounce a character to the hand, right? So whenever they use Mother Knows Best, Mother Gothel, or even this Nana card, you're going to be able to gain extra lore. And if you set up multiple staffs, then you're gaining 2 lore every time, right? So it's kind of a control deck that plays a little bit more into its top end. You have the 2 Demona, the 4 Shift Mother Gothel, the 4 Clarabelle, and the 2 Shift Jasmine as well. And you're just constantly trying to gain board advantage, right? And at the very end of the game, once both of you have a million cards in hand because of all the Show Me Mores and Amethyst Chromacons, your Tinkerbells can quest for 4.
Yeah, I think that this deck's game plan is very cool, and let's even talk about it and break it down step by step, right? So on turn 1, you play the 1-drop, or maybe they play their 1-drop. Sapphire decks and maybe even green-blue could drop a Clarabelle, and let's really go in depth on this, because after your turn 1 and their turn 2 ramp, you can develop a Staff or a Chromacon, get some more cards, and if they don't do anything on turn 4, if they just play a Cinderella and ramp, then you can drop a Nala to potentially bounce back that 1-drop Clarabelle. Now, I do know that they can just play the 1-drop and shift on that same turn, but if they did not have access to that Cinderella, you set them back like turns before they can even get to the game's established board. And on top of that, you'll be able to also use the Hey Hey Bumbled Rooster to give yourself additional ink, because this is almost like your ramp when you're on the draw. And being able to just take back the on the play ability after you're bouncing your opponent's board could also just mean you could start winning the race. There actually is a lot of 2-lore questers in this deck outside of that Tinkerbell for closing out games. So even if you're able to just get like 4 or 6 lore before you start using your staff bounces and getting that additional value to end the game, it could help a lot into reaching those goals and crossing the finish line. But the aggro matchups, again, we heard about Michael's tournament not playing against any like dog decks or aggro decks. I was also at that tournament myself, and there was plenty of those decks to face. However, your matchups and your day shouldn't depend on whether or not you can play this deck or not. This is a very unique deck. I don't think we've seen too many Brainiac style lists take on this approach with the cards, and it is interesting to see a deck like this in the current meta. But like we did say earlier in this video, homebrews have a place here, and we're seeing Michael win these tournaments with homebrews like this. So adapting to the aggro decks might be what we need to do now, with DLC Melbourne's tournament results going to be applied here. And again, congratulations. Really got to thank you too for showing up to our local game store, Olympus Project in Whittier, and showing us your support and playing these awesome decks there too, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, I just want to mention a couple notes that Michael wanted me to throw into this video. He was pretty excited about us covering it. So he was saying that the dog matchup is really hard, right? Like, and kind of like the Amber Steel aggro matchup can be kind of tough. But he was saying that if the meta ends up shifting to like mostly aggro dogs or Amber Steel, you probably want to take out the Ursula Deceiver and play the new Minnie Mouse, because the new Minnie Mouse is a 2-cost, 3 strength, 3 willpower character. That'll help you contest the dog matchup a little bit. Also kind of saying maybe you play more Jasmine so that you give more characters reckless, or you cut out the Show Me Mores for Woodchuck Guidebook, because against those aggro decks, unfortunately, you're giving them a lot of cards to their hand and they can go way more wide than you. There is also a situation where you add more Under the Sea, maybe. That's kind of what I was talking about the other day. He actually came to the shop yesterday and we were playing. He cooked me, by the way. And one of the cool plays he did, was he had 9 ink and like double staff on board, and I thought it was good. I quested with like everything, and he just goes for 9 ink, Jasmine, shift Jasmine, and everything went back to my hand. He gained like 8 lore. And I was like, whoa, what the heck? He was telling me he won a game like that too, just bouncing like the multiple characters, because it also includes your own characters. So he was able to just gain like 10 lore in one turn. Kind of crazy, but huge shout out to Michael, aka Ramen, for not only supporting us, but taking down the Top Choice Gaming tournament with a, one-of-a-kind bounce deck. So aside from the DLCs and some other tournaments, we had a CCQ this weekend. This was at the Axion Now event, the Mega Illumineers Cup, and first place was none other than Miss Lorcana. Huge shout out, Miss Lorcana, representing women in trading card games. Very cool to see. Very cool to see. I know a lot of the Lorcana girlies were really hyped for that one, and I was pretty hyped myself. I love seeing the diversity in trading card games, especially nowadays. You know what I mean? I feel like when we grew up, it was such a. Now we just have a beautiful community. I think it's awesome. Amethyst Steel, very, very strong. We got Angel. This new 4-cost character will let you discard a card and deal 2 damage to an opposing character. And if you're worried about these dog decks, I think this Angel is going to kind of give you a little bit of an advantage. I already liked playing cards like David Xanatos last format for the dog matchup, or even Nana, and I think this Angel just might be a little bit better. And I am eating my words here, because I did say before I did not like Angel and Amethyst Steel, but after seeing it multiple times, I think it's pretty good. We're also playing the Genie Magical Researcher. I'm once again eating my words. How do you feel about this 4 copies of Christopher Robin in this deck?
Christopher Robin is probably one of the best cards to come out for the Amethyst Steel deck. I never really thought about it, but a 2-lore quester on turn 1 is probably what this deck needed, and I'm not seeing many other 2-drops, so it almost fills the other spot that it has as a 2-drop, right? Because the Pocahontas uninkable character that we're seeing here in this list is a lot different than what we're used to seeing, like Black Herons or Jafar Royal Visors. So it almost seems like you're comfortable just playing another 1-drop on turn 2 if you have to, or 2 1-drops on turn 2. Because on turn 3, our Cheshire Cats and our Genies are really going to stick on the board a lot better and also deal with a lot of characters. And that's probably the most important character you have to play as an Amethyst Steel deck list, because that's going to allow you to sing the strength of a Raging Fire that you need to start removing their board. Angel in the deck, I think, also makes room for Yzma to come back in, and we don't see Dumbos in this list, and I think that makes more sense now that I think about it. There is a lot of answers to evasives. I think Amber having 4 copies of the Horseman Strikes in its card pool now makes it almost a liability to stick a Dumbo on the board, and you can empty your hand quite easily with the amount of 1-drops and 2-drops we have, plus the Angel being able to discard cards and deal 2 damage means we're more than likely going to be able to draw 2 to 3 cards off this Yzma, and I think that's very strong. So Amethyst Steel still reigning on top, winning tournaments and winning CCQs. That means you have your invite to Continentals, and congratulations. I can't wait to see what other deck lists people decide to bring out for this future format.
We have a 5th place list. I kind of want to go over some of these spicier deck lists from this tournament now that we've seen like the winners or from these future tournaments. So we have a Amethyst Amber list that's playing Raging Storm and 1 Cauldron. Very, very cool. Now this is kind of how I thought we're going to be seeing the yellow-purple deck going forward. I think the combo Monstro thing is still, very real. However, I like this more. I think this is a little bit more consistent. Grandmother Willow on 2, Genie on 4, Elsa, or maybe even an Ursula Whisper of Vanessa instead on turn 4, right? This is one of our evasive characters that you can boost as well. Maybe this is going to be able to do something in the meta. I've never been a big fan of this card, but I know, Zach, you like this card. Now, why do you like this card so much?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why I think this card's pretty good right now. One, it is just a well-statted character that can also quest for 2 right off the bat, which gives Amethyst a lot of closeout potential. I know it does have a lot of 2 lore questers, but being able to boost 1 and then start questing for 3 is pretty scary. What's even scarier is if I'm playing a deck like this and I'm staring down an Ursula Whisper of Vanessa and they don't boost it, that means my Horseman Strikes is not available to be used on it, right? So on the following turn, when they decide to boost it and quest for 3, if they deploy another threat, if I have to then decide to use 3 of my ink on the following turn to just deal with the Ursula, I don't know how I start climbing back against the other cards that my opponent starts to play. And plus, you have Madame M. Elephant to start returning that Ursula back to your hand. It's almost like they can never Horseman Strikes it ever. So this is definitely one of the cards I'm going to be experimenting with if I do decide to play with Amethyst in the future of this format. But maybe you guys can start experimenting with it a little bit earlier than me and let me know your feedback in the comments.
Now, this is a deck list that we were both kind of messing with in the beginning of the format, right? The Amber Steel mid-range strategy, right? So this was from the Go Ink Yourself tournament. Very, very cool. This list finished in 8th place by Leslie Voss. Huge shout out to you for making it all the way to top 8 of the 77-player tournament. Amber Steel mid-range still feels like a real deck, I think, especially now that we have this underdog Angel, Singer 3 on turn 1 potentially to be able to pop off an Akut Edzamuti, which means you can start dropping your Angel experiments or your aerial ethereal voice pretty early on, right? Now, this Whisper Aerial is one of our iconic rares, so I'm always excited to see an iconic rare in the meta. Very cool. This card, you can boost it, and once it's boosted, every time you play a song, once per turn, you get to draw a card, right? It's once per turn, right? Okay, so but it's cool is if you have multiple of this aerial, you can start drawing 2 cards, maybe 3 cards. But really, I think the best draw engine for this deck is not even the Goliath here. No. I think it's the Stitch Snowboarder, man. This card's really strong. I've been kind of preaching this to a lot of my Amber enjoyers. 5-cost inkable character. If you can play it out early off of the Amuti song, it's so good, right? 4 strength, 5 willpower. Anytime you quest, if you got 2 characters aside from him on the board as well, you get to draw an extra card. It doesn't sound like the most impactful ability, but after like the 2nd or 3rd time you do this, your opponent is forced. They are forced to trade multiple characters into this card, unless they're playing something like Thunderbolt strength in the same turn, or unless they have 5 characters and a strength, they're not going to be able to remove this Stitch Snowboarder very effectively. It's 4 strength, so it goes right under the World's Greatest Criminal Mind, which is really cool. And it's not even anywhere near the ability to get under the seed without a Della's Moon or Horseman without that kind of stuff, right? So I think it's a very strong card in a deck like this.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool winter spell cards in this deck list, and I think Amber and Steel has the most to play with right now. So the combos that I see right off the top of my head are something like the Shift Aerial, being able to also damage your own characters with her ability. You can't forget that, guys, that it means you can pay 2 ink after using the song and put 3 damage on her or 3 damage on another character. But that won't matter because we're going to remove that 3 damage and draw 3 cards with Ohana Means Family. It's almost like playing a Finder's Keepers, right, in a deck like this, because that is essentially 5 ink for 3 cards, and that's enough to get you there if you were also behind on cards. You have so much removal, so drawing these cards could also just give you more songs to use the aerial with if that's what you also needed to do for future turns, and being able to turn off any other actions your opponent has by playing the 3-cost Games Referee Pete. I think a lot of us forgot about this character and haven't had to deal with a Pete in a while, but Amber Steel Song has access to this and many more cards, and I will expect people to start experimenting with decks like this going forward. But yes, I am an Amber Steel enjoyer. If you guys didn't know, the tournament at the Top Choice Gaming event, I decided to play Amber Steel myself. I didn't do too well, so we're not going to talk about that, but I do like some of the cards that are in this deck list because I also played myself. But congratulations for also getting to 8th place at a 77 player event. That does mean something.
In 4th place of this tournament, we have some Sapphire Steel for you guys. And I think in the last Meta Watch video, we had a couple comments that said, no Sapphire Steel, what the heck? So sorry about that, guys. I know there's a pretty big cult following for our Sapphire Steel enjoyers. And if you're still watching this video just to see this, we appreciate you. But 4 copies of the new Pete, the Ghost of Christmas Future, right? I think this card is a lot better in Sapphire Steel. I think this is probably where this card ends up. I don't think you want to play this in like the Amber Sapphire deck, or maybe not like the blue-green control deck, but in a Sapphire Steel deck, when you can go turn 1 Mulan, turn 2 Tipo, turn 3 Cinderella into a Pete, seems pretty strong in my opinion. But I mean, we still have the Jasmine Shift Jasmine line for turn 2. No Pleakley, looking like we're just ramping with our Tipo and our Sail here, but I get the feeling that we might see Pleakley in the future, right? Because I feel like ramping into the P to find a Goliath just seems really strong, right?
Well, that is very strong, but let's also not forget this Pete is an ally, so it just works very well with the synergy this Jasmine provides.
Yeah, that's broken.
And yes, that's a lot of cards, right? So maybe we don't want to Pleakley away our Jasmine, or maybe we're just considering other cards in place of it to just have more explosive turns. But Sapphire Steel not really doing too much out of the norm outside of adding the Angel and the Petes from the new Winter Spell set, but I think that is perfect. I'm not too sure if Moana needs to be played in a deck like this. We aren't even seeing Namari in this specific deck list. I think we are valuing the additional card that Pete can find us in place of it, and that is not necessarily losing a card like Namari would do. But with all that being said, 2 copies of Ink Runner, I do want to go on the record saying that this and Giant Fairy Tinkerbell is very unfair, and more people need to start doing it. So Sapphire Steel players, you guys have all the answers to almost anything in the world. How's that dog matchup doing? Because I think we're really going to have to start building around our decks and beating dogs a lot more often after this weekend.
Now I'm thinking if we want to deal with the dog matchup while also kind of dealing with the Sapphire passiveness as well, I think Amber Steel might be a pretty good deck to pick. Naturally, you have a lot of actions and songs that can deal with some of the dog stuff like Fire the Cannons or Strength, or even like a Shift Rhino is pretty good to deal with an opposing Daisy Duck. But you also get the luxury of playing Tiana, right? Aurora turn 1, Tiana turn 2, still probably one of the best combos in the game right now, especially against Sapphire. So I think Amber Steel has a little bit more flexibility this meta than last meta. Huge shout out to Thomas C for taking down this second start to the right tournament. This was a 209 player tournament. I believe it was in France. Very, very cool. Look, and we're also playing, look, Zach, 4 copies of Chief Powhatan. This is a 4-cost inkable 5/5 character with bodyguard. Very, very strong. Has a slight drawback that says this character can't challenge, right? But I think this is better than our 4-cost Pluto, our guard dog, right? We had the 4-cost Pluto before. He had a 5/5 stat line as well, only if he didn't have any damage, right? But he used to be able to swing. I think this is a little bit better because this is going to probably get you multiple trades if your opponent has to decide to swing into it, right? And then 4 copies of Anani, the stage manager. This card, broken. I think, which by the way, I wish they would have made this an enchanted, right? cards like some of these uncommon broken cards would have been so cool as enchanteds.
Yeah, not to mention that other uncommons have gotten enchanteds that don't see any play at all. I'm pretty sure this one does deserve that slot. But Amber Steel aggro just showing up right now with the Winter Spell meta still trying to be decided. And yes, Sapphire decks may have to consider Spooky Site again if we're going to see a lot more Amber Steel aggro come into the meta. But Mowgli's, Pete's, there's so much counterplay. How do you stop it all? You know, Lorcana is a complicated game, and that's why I really like playing it a lot. It does tickle my brain in ways that I couldn't have done in other card games before. So this deck list also does utilize a lot of 2 lore questers, so you can also build your board up and just like dogs, turn everything sideways in one go. You can lock the board down with something like a Pete, or maybe you can sing 2 songs and a Fire the Cannons all in one turn to remove their board. That way they can never deal with any of your characters. And Doc being able to refill your hand, Nani finding your Docs even earlier. It's feeling like Amber Steel could show up and just win events now. And I wouldn't be surprised if more and more people brought it to the DLC that we're going to have in Belgium. Just keep in mind, guys, if you guys are going to be at the DLC in Ghent, I will be in attendance. I plan on playing and competing in that event. It'll be my first time ever being international, and I'm a little excited but also a little nervous. So if you guys have any tips too, feel free to reach out and let me know what I should try or what I should do while I'm in town. And in typical Frank Karsten fashion, I am staring at 2 deck lists here in front of me. Purple Steel, once again, the mad mathematician himself has done it again and built us what I would like to call the split Amethyst Steel, and it's pretty much taking on 2 different roles in one deck list, because you have aggro play lines and you have mid-range play lines, and it seems to me that we are favoring a lot of stronger statted characters over some of the utility that was once provided to us. We are still also playing the 2 copies of the uninkable Pocahontas. I love that this is making its way into Amethyst Steel deck lists. When I first read this card, right, I didn't think it would be put into Amethyst Steel, but now seeing people jam it in, it makes so much more sense. It's basically a 2 lore quester at minimum, and potentially can quest for 3 or even 4 with the right circumstances. And I do believe it can choose opposing exerted characters, so it gives you the edge into the other aggro matchups that are going to be turning sideways a lot. And I think you'll outrace them, because if you get 16 or 18 lore, the game's over with a giant cobra or 2, right? And with the amount of removal that you still have access to with angels, strengths, and the new copy of Tigger, this is just a lot of ways to deal with the opposing board. I love Amethyst Steel, man, and Frank Karsten does it again with the 2 deck split.
Here we have a Amber Steel deck list from the same tournament, by the way, 152 players. I believe this was like in top 8 or top 16. This is by Dave Souse, and Amber Steel, once again, kind of more of a mid-range strategy here, though. Actually, it's just interesting. It's like mid-range aggro, because we have 2 copies of our Bolt, the down but not out. This character enters play exerted, but he can quest for 4, I believe, which is pretty strong, right? So you probably want to protect him with our Raja or maybe our Broadway. I was super hyped on Broadway last format. lot. So that's why I brought it up in this in this video, because I think this card is pretty good. He is a gargoyle character, 5 cost, inkable, 4 strength, and 6 willpower. Quests for 2 and has bodyguard. It's a really strong card to curve into, and if you want to play this out early with your Angel Imuti combo, it's gonna protect your your aggressive cards at the beginning of the game. So imagine setting up a Pluto, Angel, Imuti, and then you just start dropping your 5 and 6 cost characters by turns 3 and 4. That seems pretty fun. So here we have kind of like a mix of aggro and mid range too, because we have the 6 cost Baloo, the 6 cost Goliath, and even our Tinkerbell.
Yeah, I actually kind of want to go on the record and say that this like deck has pretty interesting lines. Also, being able to use your Rapunzel ready for adventure and give the bolt the essential bubble, I think is pretty strong, right? I think some decks couldn't deal with that efficiently and might just have to let you start questing. They're gonna have to let you quest with that bolt, and then if you have like a Singer 3 that isn't the bolt in play, you could potentially drop a blue bodyguard on turn 4, right? And this is almost like an Amber Steel mid-range deck list, because we have 2 copies of the 4 cost uninkable Tinkerbell. Now this almost reads like the new Nani that was printed, except that it can also just add any character of the top 4 of your deck rather than a 2 cost or less. But at the cost of it being uninkable and a 1 strength character, you do have to kind of consider how many copies you are going to play. And this deck list honestly looks very interesting. I think it's just missing a couple copies of Surfer Stitch. I think that that card would make the most sense in a deck like this. Also, being able to play them on turn 5 after you sing Akudi Muti will just be the bee's knees, right? And an 8 willpower character can have up to 7 damage on it, which means 7 cards will be drawn off an Ohana Means Family if you get to that point. And it may not always get there. I do feel like you have to be realistic. Some people are going to really consider that card and play around it if they know you're on Amber, and you do have to think about damaging your own character sometimes to draw cards off of that. But that's why I like Amber Steel. You can just damage your own characters. Angel can also deal 2 damage to any of your own characters too. So maybe if you need to discard something and just draw 2 off Ohana, that can get you the cards you need to end the game.
Now here we have a color combo that has been kind of hyped, in the beginning of this pre-meta. We didn't see much success in most of the tournaments we just went over. However, there was a blue-yellow player who finished in like 37th place of that DLC. And once again, I just get the feeling that people aren't really trying the newer strategies because everyone's still kind of experimenting. But huge shout out to IKS Dirt Bikes though here for getting top 16 of this tournament with Amber Sapphire Control. We have 1 copy of Cauldron, 3 copies of Raging Storm, this new card that says banish all characters on the board, uninkable, which is kind of a drawback, but hey, you can always ink it with your Tipo, maybe your Cinderella, even 2 copies of Spooky Sight in this deck, dude. That's a lot of anti-aggro, cards in this deck. Very, very cool. With this type of strategy, though, you sacrifice a lot of your early game, right? Because you only have your 4 Elenui as your 1 cost character. And again, some of these aggro Amber Steel decks, these aggro dog decks, that might feel kind of bad, but you can curve into a Ludwig, maybe hit one of their non-characters, or if you're just trying to ramp Tipo into Cinderella into your 5 cost Pete, that seems pretty good, right?
Most definitely. I think the blue-yellow strategy can take on different roles. Honestly, being more of like a straight control, like late game bomb deck, or have a lot of anti-aggro tools built inside of it. But it's really hard to dedicate a certain build and play it in tournaments in this game. I do think that we have to make these critical decisions when we are deck building and decide what cards are going to be more impactful than others. So I do understand some of the card choices in this specific deck list, on top of the interesting one-ofs that we have included too. But other ways to kind of go into another blue-yellow approach could also be something like this, which has the new featured Tamatoa Boost character. This is a different tournament, by the way. This was the iconic 1K tournament at the Game Grid Lahey by Ice Casket. So another way to build and approach the blue-yellow deck. This one's taking on way more of a late-game toolbox strategy and just using the new Pete and the Tamatoa to pseudo end the game, right? Being able to put cards under characters, and then just having warded characters on top of that could just be the way to play a blue-yellow deck. Also, you have infinite ways of gaining the ramp advantage with the new 4-cost Thinkable Bell. This also does include herself. Just keep in mind that when she is banished, she will go into the Inkwell face down and exerted. So just another way to get the additional ramp that this deck needs. And you have tons of removal, right? You have 4 Hades, 4 Let It Go, 3 Raging Storm, and 2 Spooky Sight. You will be able to deal with all of the boards that the dog deck could give you. You just have to get to the late game. You just have to survive. That's the name of the game. So ramping, accelerating, and making sure you have enough ink to play the Raging Storm earlier is what you need to do. And I do like the approach of this way to play blue yellow. And it has no cauldron. It has not too many one-ofs in this deck as compared to the previous one, but that just means there's so many different ways to try it out and experiment it. I don't even know where I'm landing on a blue-yellow control deck right now, so let us know in the comments what you seem to be favoring, or what are some cool techs you're trying out with this color combo in mind.
I'm a big fan of this Tamatoa, by the way. The 7-cost Tamatoa, having Ward as a 6/6 body character is really strong, because this is going to contest the Demona, it's going to contest the opposing blue Hades as well, and every time you boost, you can quest for a little bit more, right? You do have that synergy with Pete. There's no other boost characters, and unfortunately, I wish this synergized with Cauldron, but it specifically says characters or locations. It does not say items. Unfortunate, but I get the feeling that blue-yellow is just a deck that needs to be worked on a little bit. You know, I don't think it's like a bad strategy at all. I would like to see this kind of as more of a detective strategy, though. That's just my personal opinion. We'll get into that on another video.
I think it's kind of criminal that this new Tamatoa doesn't have the word item anywhere in its text, right? Like Tamatoa, no item synergy. What's going on?
And if you really like both these strategies, you can play it like Hamilton here, who finished in 6th place of this iconic 1K tournament, playing 2 of the Tamatoa and 1 Cauldron anyways, right? With 4 Raging Storm. Very cool, very cool. I get the feeling that this Black Cauldron is a very good card in this deck. And whenever I've lost against this blue-yellow deck online, it's usually because they were able to set up like a Cauldron and just start going Raging Storm, Raging Storm. Now I'm going to play my Tamatoas and Stitches and Hades from my discard pile. Very annoying. You know, feels kind of scary, especially if you're not playing Benja or Clarabelle, or maybe this Wasabi. This is a 4-cost inkable character, 3 strength, 3 willpower that says on play, destroy an item and gain 1 lore depending on whose item it was, right? So you can pop your own ink runner, gain a lore if you really want to, or deal with those problematic items on the opposing side of the board. Very, very interesting. We're also seeing Sapphire Amber players use this Nakoma. This is a new character from Winterspell. She's a 4-cost inkable character with 4 strength and 6 willpower. Just a vanilla character, but I think what Zach pointed out, I think the reason why we're playing this is because it's an excellent target for Ohana Means Family.
Yeah, and do keep in mind that you have the Elwini as the way to give her support and 2 additional strength. She can also swing into the 7-cost Tramp if it is exerted, so that does allow you to deal with some of the dog board before you get to board wipe them with your Raging Storm. And with 4 Raging Storms in the deck, it's going to be quite difficult to force all copies out of the hand by playing Mowgli. So I do like just maxing out on 4 copies and just making sure you will always be able to have or resolve at least one of them. And I still don't think people really remember what being Be Prepared was like. I've seen a lot of people not respect Raging Storm into the Blamber decks, as Hamilton named his deck list, and honestly it's pretty polarizing. I think you really will have to start remembering that on 7 ink you cannot just put more characters onto the board against a blue amber deck anymore. You will have to respect Raging Storm, and also Cauldron being able to bring back any of these characters that they had to banish themselves is pretty important. I think Cauldron is honestly, its stocks have gone up over quite a bit, and we will be talking about this at this week's Market Watch. But yes, guys, this was the last deck list that we were going to go over today's video. Thank you so much to all of you Lorcana goons that are still here to the very end. We really appreciate you a lot. And if there's any of these ideas that have sparked your interest, or you feel like dropping some knowledge on any of these deck lists because you are the ones that played them, make sure to join our Discord down in the link below and let us know your thoughts and what you're thinking about going into the future of this format. I don't think it's solved at all whatsoever, and I'm very excited and curious to see what I'm gonna have to play at the DLC again.
Yeah, man. I feel like the Melbourne DLC, like I said earlier, was kind of more of a representation of like some of the top players picking like what they believe to be a very consistent or safe strategy for that big of a tournament, right? But when you look at all these other tournaments that we went through, we have some tournaments with 250 players, 150 players, 80 players, and some crazy outliers in these like first place top 8 finishes. So I get the feeling that, you know, we just have a lot more to experiment with in this meta. Still very early on, and I'm sure there's still tournaments that we didn't even cover. And if you guys did well in those tournaments, like Zach said, join the Discord, share the information in our Discord. We're always chopping it up in there whenever we can anyway. And I get the feeling that it's going to be a very cool meta, right? It feels like one of the first homebrew metas that we've had in a while. Do want to give a quick, once again, shout out to Pristine Protection. If you guys want some sleeves, code Goons10, get 10% off right there for your decks, which is pretty cool. And huge shout out to all the players, all the tournament organizers, and all the Lorcana Goons still watching at home. My name's Kevin. This is Zach Stone. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content. But until then, we'll see you goons next time.